still like dogs without a bone if we have the money alone. Because appreciation is on the human mind. Everyone needs some.
6:19 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, work hasn't started yet this morning on that QREP interchange, but it is ongoing, and it is something that I'm sure those commuting through that area, those vehicles, they would like that issue to be sorted out as quickly as they can. But it's going to take quite some time. It's an interchange, and you know that will take a tremendous amount of work. Just having a look there via traffictt.com. So let's move into the issue that we're discussing, because this was scheduled actually before yesterday's events, and as it's turned out, it seems most appropriate to have this discussion, because for families dealing with members who suffer with the issues related to mental health, it can be an uphill task from just basic awareness or proper care for those who need an environment change. There must be an awareness drive to better assist those in need. Today, as I said, is World Mental Health Day, and this year's theme focuses on suicide prevention. Well, we're joined on set by Hanif Benjamin, President and Chief Executive Officer for the Center for Human Development Group of Companies. He's a clinical therapist and clinical traumatologist, and just in passing is also the Chairman of the Children's Authority, which we need to mention as well. Mr. Benjamin, good to see you. Thanks very
Always
much
a pleasure
for
for
joining
having
us once again. We can't have this discussion in isolation and pretend that what happened yesterday didn't happen and the information coming out of that. I suppose in that context, apart from all the other issues about defining mental health and telling us the issues and the incidences and how chronic it is and so on, the attitudes towards mental health, because apart from whether we want to argue about whether it's slavery, whether it's trafficking, whether it's two media houses fighting one another and trying to get on top of one another with a big story and so on, the issue also is about the attitude of society towards those who are vulnerable, whether it be mental health, whether it be drug abuse, whether it be other issues that result in them being rendered virtually homeless. In that context, what is your perspective as far as our attitudes towards mental health?
You know, Fazir, when this story broke, I said, Lord, I'm going on television with Fazir, and this story is a big one, and it fell smack in the middle of World Mental Health Day. You are quite right. The conversation about mental illness, mental health, is one that has been treated like a bastard child. The concept of mental illness is one that we are not ready to face. And as a society, long before this incident, or whatever we want to call it, we have been grappling with the scourge of this dirty word, mental health. And so, for families, for individual, for society, we push it aside. Because one, we really don't understand it. Two, we don't know what to do with it. And three, it is an embarrassing situation for many. And so, rather than see it for what it is, an illness, a disorder, just like heart and diabetes and all of these things, we treat it as if it's something bad. And so we don't want to deal with it. Or we don't know how to deal with it, because we're not speaking about the situation sufficiently so that we can help John public understand what is mental health, what is mental illness, how do you treat with it. Now, you're quite right in the other sense in terms of mental illness is debilitating situation where you really don't know what to do. And a family can be trying everything humanly possible. Without the professional help, then where do we go from here? And I think a lot of times, family get to the wit end. You see, because I tell people mental illness is not the madman on the street, you know, that is what we were taught. Mental illness is a continuum from mental good health to mental ill health. And we all traverse on that continuum from time to time. But the problem is, when we get to that place of mental illness, what then? And or can we provide intervention along the continuum before we get to this end? In Trinidad and Tobago, the amount of people living on our streets, the amount of persons living in St. Anne's, like permanently living in St. Anne's, the amount of persons living with mental illness, whether or not you're managing or you are struggling, It's a phenomenal figure.
But we seem comfortable, and it's only now when this thing is exposed, as it was yesterday, and actually whether it was properly intended, whether it was perfectly accurate to refer to it as trafficking or modern day slavery, it may actually expose yet again the callousness of this society in dealing with these types of issues, that when vulnerable individuals and for different reasons, we seem very, very comfortable because as you would be aware, the information is coming out that many people knew about it, both at the state level, at the governmental level, both at the level of communities, they knew what was going on. Yet we see, once we could put these individuals who we describe as mad, or who we describe in different terms, derogatory terms, once we could put them behind locked doors and whatever, whether it's cages, whether it's handcuffs, whether it's proper beds and so on, once we don't have to see them, we are comfortable with it.
And that is the society. Once we don't have to interact, once we don't have to see, once we don't have to work too hard with them, we're okay. And that goes for all our vulnerable people, the elderly. Put them in a home somewhere, no real monitoring and no evaluation. Our children, just whatever. And so it is a constant challenge as a society, the way we care for one another.
And in relation to that, and I don't want to take you off course in the points that you wanted to raise in defining mental health so we could better understand. But just you mentioned St. Anne's. That has become part of our lexicon as well. You remember the famous calypso from David Rudder way back in the 1980s. We mad, we more than mad, where we go in St. Anne's. And just reading up on some of the information following yesterday's events, someone was saying that the facility at St. Anne's is up to capacity. They are beyond capacity. So, and therefore, that is why that they are now subcontracting the responsibilities as far as dealing with individuals with mental health to other facilities, hence that situation in Aruca and who knows, maybe other areas in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's not just an attitudinal issue, but it's an infrastructural issue. Do we even have the capacity to cope with these different issues?
I think we do. I think St. Anne's, when it came about, needed, and every country need an institution, because there are going to be people who are acute in their diagnoses and require acute treatment. So we need a St. Anne's. However, we also have the other RHAs. And I believe that mental health should be decentralized from this one place. This administration I've seen have been doing some of that. I saw they opened the place in Shagwan as the stress relief center, and there are also some other mental health clinics around the country. But I believe that we can do a lot more than that. I think that we need to take mental health and put it on the same line as physical health. And I have been advocating for every health center should have a psychologist, a social worker, a psychiatrist on staff. Every community center should have a social worker working there on a weekend or whatever. We have enough social workers, psychologists, and clinicians out here. Mental health should not be a secret. It should not be a search, a Easter hunt to find out where to go and to whom. We should be able to put mental health in every single hospital. You should have a proper ward. You should have a proper infrastructure to treat with mental health. I should not leave Sando to come up the road here. Every health center should be able to have that beginning screener so that we don't get it on the furthest end of the spectrum when you have a full-blown mental disorder.
How do we get to that level? Before you give us that clinical definition, how do we get to that level where we are willing to have that discussion comfortably? Where in a workplace, I could say to you, for example, boss, I ain't feeling too good. I feel depressed. For the longest while, I feeling depressed. Maybe is there somebody I could have a consultation with without feeling that automatically they say I'm going mad? And as happened, sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
As happened I remember in an issue at one time where someone in the public service had an experience, and they come for she. Like in other words, it's like to take it a totally away to the madhouse. So how can we even start to recognize that someone saying that they don't feel well within them, they feel troubled. How could we even begin that discussion?
You know, this conversation is not a 10-minute conversation in
I
a
know.
Fazir. And I gave in a conference at Cipriani College a couple in the summer, well, in the July-August vacation, and I dealt with mental illness, the hidden cost in the workplace. And it is real. What you're talking about there is real. What we need to do to start the conversation is, one, recognize that there is a problem. I don't think that people are seeing the problem. If you don't have a bandage or blood, they don't see it as a challenge. You see, mental health is a disease of the mind. And unless people see some physical attribute, they don't take it seriously. The conversation must move from in a corner to countrywide, to our policymakers, to our advocates, so that we could understand that mental illness is real. It is real in the workplace. You should be able to take a sick leave that is attributed to mental health without feeling ashamed, without your employers making you feel ashamed. You need to be able to give a provision. Fazir, you know when we will really reach? When the insurance companies in this country could give you the same money that you get for high blood pressure pill and heart attack and stroke, the same money to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. You understand? And that is when we know we would have reached. Because right now, for some insurance company, there is no you can't get back no money for that, and if you do, it's minimal. And so when we put everything on par, imagine they will pay for you to go for high blood pressure medication or heart medication for the rest of your life, but the problem that caused you to have the stroke and the heart attack and the stress, they're not going to treat with it. And so the conversation must now move throughout the country in a real way, from government to set policies and laws, and our people on the ground to understand that this is real. Our hospital, our RHAs to understand that mental illness must be part of a clinic. Every hospital should have a mental health clinic.
But the fact is, we don't. The reality is now, and this could be just the usual classic 9-day wonder, you know. By this evening, everybody's studying CPL or the football game or whatever, and by next week, nobody talking about this again. I was speaking to a young man who's involved in counseling in one of our public NGOs. I wouldn't mention the name and so on. And he was saying that basically the work that they do is so burdensome. It's so continuous, but it's people with mental issues. But you can tell by their salary that they're not regarded at all. They are considered the lowest end of the scale, that this is not a priority either at the public sector level, the private sector level, because we as citizens don't see this as something that is important.
You're quite right. There are few in the vineyard working with this, and the situation is real, it is constant. And if Trinidad and Tobago continue to bury its head and not understand that we are dealing with mental health issue, why we need to think that we are special and not part of the diaspora or the wider world in terms of the mental health statistics. We fall smack dab in the middle of what it is. We are one of the highest in this diaspora in terms of suicidalities.
Before I ask you and you talked about that a couple of weeks ago when we were finishing up on our family focus series, but just to give you an idea, I remember when I was just covering some cricket in New Zealand and so on, they were openly talking about mental health. They were saying 1 in 6 individuals in New Zealand suffers with mental health. 1 in 6, which means 16% Yeah. When are we going to get to that level where people are willing to be able to, public individuals, significant popular personalities and so on, are going to be able to come out and say, look, is that a coming out thing? Is to say, look, I have suffered with depression, or and make people realize that it's not about people behaving strangely on the road, but people who you see working normally, sitting with you, by the side, waiting for a taxi, waiting for whatever, they could be suffering with mental issues.
Well,
when are we going to go that level?
And people live with mental illness, sometimes dormant and sometimes overt. You had an accident, a person gets out of the car, they strip naked and they walk, and we laugh and we make fun of it. But that is serious shock and mental issues coming out there. People go through a stress factor and it exacerbates their underlying mental health challenges. But we're not understanding that. We're not understanding that we are part of the global conversation in relation to mental health. As a matter of fact, we are up there in the statistics in relation to mental health. And if that is not an indicator that we need to take this. I'm saying to employers that mental health is real. Check your bottom line. People are taking sick leave not because they have the common cold, but I just can't deal with the pressures of today. People are unable to cope with some of the challenges that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And when you couple that with societal issues, you exacerbate. And so we need to move from this head in the sand scenario and understand that this is real. And if this situation didn't bring it to the forefront, I don't know what else will.
And therefore, how would you, for purposes of a definition, how would we define mental health? Because as I said, because we've been grown up in that way to believe that the only people suffering with mental issues are those who are behaving strangely, whatever you define as strange. How do you define mental health?
So this is a good opportunity for trying to be able to understand this. There's a difference between mental health and mental illness, but we always use the term interchangeably, and it is not so. Mental health is just like physical health. It is your emotional, psychological, social well-being. It is what we do on a daily basis. The challenge is that we go along a continuum just like physical health. So on this continuum, you go from mental good health to mental ill health vis-a-vis mental illness. So mental illness don't just happen just so. You go on this continuum where you move from, I'm in good health. You're engaging in society, your emotional well-being is good, you're making sound decision. And then now you move to mental illness, and that is what we're dealing with. So once you understand that there is a difference between the two, you must now understand what mental health is, which is your emotional well-being, you're engaged, and then you have mental illness, which is a disease of the mind. It is a disease, just like you have heart disease, whatever disease, mental illness is a disease of the mind. It is where your ability to manage your day-to-day affairs have been so compromised by some emotional roller coaster, some stimuli have been entered, some stressor in the environment has now changed your ability to manage your psychological well-being, your emotional well-being. Right? So mental health is when you are in control of your psychological well-being, mental health well-being, stress factors, mitigating factors. Mental illness is when you are no longer in a position to manage those things. And so now you move on the continuum into mental illness or mental bad health. You see?
How do you therefore, with that definition, and because as you said correctly, you don't have a bandage over your head, you don't wear a particular badge to say there are issues related to mental health concerning me, so you are easily, you can't tell by looking at somebody, you can't tell. How do you intercept as a society, whether with social workers, whether with counselors, how do you intercept so that it doesn't deteriorate to the level where people become openly dysfunctional to the point where they have to be institutionalized?
And I think that is a powerful question, because the earlier we understand the signs and symptomatologies or the symptoms, the faster we're able to institute some level of intervention to cause you to not get mental ill health or mental illnesses. And so there are 5 major warning signs that people should look out for.
Okay, so what I'll ask you, just take a pause because we have to take a break, and as you realize, as with many of these broader issues, we never have enough time to cover it in the sort of detail we would like. So rather than me rambling on, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll ask Mr. Benjamin to go through those 5 points, and in the time we have available, develop any further points you would like to make right after this break.
Appreciation plays on the human mind. Everyone needs some for happiness all the time, because important.
Let nature take its course. Don't ever try to reciprocate, because it.
Coming up towards 6:40 in Trinidad and Tobago with a quick look at Debe. Not too much time to ramage on the different issues related to the downtown Debe, if I could use that term, because we want to get back in the time available with Hanif Benjamin, clinical traumatologist, on those points you want to raise in relation to the understanding of mental health.
Right. So there are 5 major warnings. There are many, but there are 5 major. And I want everybody to understand that, right down, including employers. The first thing is a change in personality. You must understand the baseline of people. You know the people you're working with, you know your family members, so you must understand when the personality has changed. Right? That is the first sign that something is going on. Then you want to talk about uncharacteristic anxiety anger, and moodiness. All of a sudden, you are now angry, you have a lot of anxiety, and you're quite moody. And I'm not talking about your normal moodiness or your normal anger. I'm talking about something that is persistent, and it is deep-seated, and it is unexplained in many respects. So you're not sure why you're angry, you're not sure why you're anxious, you're not sure why you're moody. That is something that you should examine as well. Social withdrawal and isolation. We are very sociable people. We like to go here, engage in this, in the office, we're talking. From the time you see people pulling away from things that they love, from places that they love, from people that they love, that is a serious red flag. You should be asking questions immediately, what's going on? Then you're talking about lack of self-care and all risky behaviors. You're normally taking care of yourself, and all of a sudden, you're no longer taking care of yourself. And I tell people it's a simple thing like you putting on makeup every day, and all of a sudden you're no longer wearing makeup. You know, or you're wearing a suit every day and all of a sudden you're no longer, something has changed somewhere along the line. Or you're no longer going to the barber or the hairdresser to organize yourself. Something is going on that requires some level of intervention. And a sense of hopelessness. A sense of hopelessness. People feel, they start talking as if the world is about to end. No matter what level of sunshine, they always see darkness. They always see doom and gloom. They're very pessimistic. They don't know what's going on. They have no vision. They have no focus. They have no hope. So it's like bare hopelessness. Those are the top 5 that you want to look at. You want people to say something is going on here and something has caused a change. We need to examine what might have caused or is causing this change and begin to get help.
And in the time that we have available, and we were having the discussion in the commercial break, the situation in Trinidad and Tobago is if it's not chronic, and you are best placed to advise us to where we are, you are seeing younger and younger people on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago, whether you call them homeless, whether you call them whatever term you want to use. It appears to be a situation where, just on the anecdotal evidence,
right,
in the absence of hard data, that the situation is one in which individuals, as I made the point, rather than intercepting earlier and intervening earlier,
right,
it is being allowed to get to the stage where people at younger and younger ages reach those levels of desperation where they end up on the street.
And it's sad, it is sad, and I have seen it myself, both as a practitioner and somebody living in the country. And you ask yourself, when did this get so bad? When did you get here? You know, when you're bringing a 16-year-old to me because of bad behavior in a school because he was expelled, only to figure out that this child is living with depression and anxiety since he was 3 and 4 and 5 years old, and no one was able to pick this up. Why are our children not getting the help that they need? Why aren't we recognizing what is mental health and how to intervene? And so it comes down to a level of coping. A lot of us, we don't know how to cope with difficult situations. Now, I want to make clear, the main causes for mental health, you have your environmental stressors, genetic factors, and biochemical imbalances. There's a lot of young person who's smoking different types of drugs and doing types of drugs that is causing serious chemical imbalance. So you're going into St. Anne's now for diagnosis of chemical-induced psychosis and all this kind of thing, and have lifelong implication for you. You're talking about genetic factors. So somebody in your family somewhere along the line may have been living with mental illness. And of course, environmental stressor, which is a major one. Our country's in a difficult place. And we're not seem to be managing as a people in terms of the difficulty. So more and more people are being pushed over the edge in terms of mental illness, and as a result of that, not knowing how to cope, end up where they are.
So what, in the couple of minutes that we have left, Mr. Benjamin, and I know you're rushing through some of your points because I know there's a world of information you want to get in, but if you could sum it up, because the issue is there are people out here, including some of us right here, who may have different issues that they're struggling to cope with. Yet the attitude from either their family members or their employers is, shake out it, get out it, let me go on Lime and whatever, or you better do my work. I mean, you want to hear about no issue, I don't expect no sick leave kind of thing. You better do my work. How do we even get to that level where we are willing to take the time to appreciate that there may be issues that are troubling individuals and start to intervene in a positive way rather than telling them to push that aside? How do we even begin that?
Well, I want to start where you ended, which is a positive way. We need to see mental health as something real, as something painful, and something that bothers people immensely, right? We need to understand that by not talking about it or looking at it from a punitive perspective is not helpful. Employers need to understand, and I'll put it the way that they should understand, dollars and cents. If you don't get on top of mental illness, you will lose money. You will lose productivity. So we need to take it from that angle as well. Family members, get on top of it. Get information. They can be helped. There are medication, treatments, all manner of things that can help you
But
to help
isn't
them.
it just an issue about counseling? Isn't it just an issue about allowing people to talk out their feelings
Correct.
as well?
And because people are afraid to speak up about mental illness, they suffer in silence. And by the time someone recognizes that it's a challenge, it's already way on the other end of the spectrum. If you come and say, listen now, babe, I really struggling here, I work hard, or you come and say, boss, this is what's going on, or somebody could recognize, hey, what's going on with you? And we could begin a conversation in a safe and healthy manner, then we will avoid a lot of the end result. Because again, when you look at the environmental factors, that's a major one. And environmental factors can be mitigated. But we can only mitigate it if people know. So this World Mental Health Day, I am begging Trinidad and Tobago to put down the stigma and let us recognize mental health as real, and someone can be helped, and so we wouldn't have our brothers and sisters languishing and suffering due to mental illness.
Benjamin, thank you very much for taking
Always
the
a
time, as
pleasure.
always. And as per usual, because we're dealing with the real issues of Trinidad and Tobago, we're just touching on it. But hopefully, we've highlighted the issues beyond the sensationalism of what would have transpired yesterday, and indeed really get to the heart of the matter as best as we can. Coming up towards 6:47 in Trinidad and Tobago, we'll be back right after this.
Instead, let them play up in their own mess, because I'm sure Jah will do what's best.